So in thinking about how the Holy Spirit moves in our lives in a practical way, not just in, all the things that are true that we can say about the Holy Spirit, uh, I want to give you something a little bit different, and it's in a story you won't hear very often, if at all, in 1 Kings chapter 13. So I'll summarize part of it and give you a little background, and then we'll just see how it goes, and I'll take a little break and explain some things. But just don't think of it so much as history, even though First Kings is historical. Uh, think of it more in how you can see this and apply it in your life, or what things this is like in your life. I'll try to help you with that. So let's see. First of all, you need to know that under Kings Saul, David, and Solomon in ancient Israel, it was one kingdom over everything, and until around the year 930 BC. So we're looking at roughly 3,000 years ago. And that's when the kingdoms split. It's not unusual for kingdoms to split in history. Uh, and there's usually, sometimes it's civil war, and in this case, there was a kind of that. Uh, and I can't go into it all now, because if I do that, I'll never get through this, because it's all very interesting. Anyway, the 10 tribes to the north became called Israel. Now, the original altogether was Israel, but now it's Israel up north. And Judah, which is one of the tribes, was in the south. So under two different kings. One was the one in the south at Judah was under Solomon's son. Can't tell you that whole story right now, but you can read it in 1 Kings 10, 11, 12. That he got some really bad advice, did some things that caused him to lose all the rest of the kingdom. Really comes down to not being a very good king. The north was under Jeroboam. Now, a prophet had told Jeroboam that God was going, since Solomon had not done the right thing and his son did the wrong thing, that Jeroboam was told that, okay, you can be the king of the north, and if you do everything right, if you're a good king and you are faithful to me, then, okay, everything will be great for you. But he wasn't. And the deal that happened there was that Jeroboam was afraid that people would get, in a sense, homesick for Jerusalem. They would go back south to the southern kingdom, to the capital there, where the temple was. They would worship at the temple, and then they would feel like they were loyal to Judah, to the southern kingdom, and not to him. So out of fear, he created two idols, golden calves. I don't know what it is with the golden calf thing. Golden calves at Dan and Bethel, and told the people to worship there and stop going to the temple, which was a really serious violation of the agreement that he had with God. So, and he appointed his own priesthood. He essentially invented his own religion for the purpose of keeping his kingdom together and out of fear of something happening to it. Which is funny, because that's the same as a lot of other kings, including, obviously, Henry VIII, made his own church and broke off from Rome. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so at this point, a prophet is told, go to Jeroboam and tell him that he has violated our agreement and I'm going to bring him down. So the prophet goes and does that, and says, you're building these places, but those altars, they're just going to blow up, and you're going to get killed, and your whole family's going to get wiped out because you violated this. I told you to do one thing, and you didn't do it. And you went against me on it. So at that point, the king, Jeroboam, points his finger at the prophet that went up there and told him that, and said, arrest him. And his hand withered. And so he was horrified and said, oh, please, I'm sorry, fix my hand. And the prophet prays for him and his hand gets healed. So then that's where we pick up the story. So at verse 7, the king told the man of God, that's how the prophet's referred to in here, come with me to the house for some refreshment so that I may give you a present, for healing him, I guess. Or maybe he was going to do something, I don't know. The man of God said to the king, if you gave me half your palace, I would not go with you, nor eat bread or drink water in this place. For I was instructed by the word of the Lord, do not eat bread or drink water, and do not return by the way you came. You'll see this pattern in a few other places, by the way. One of the things that's interesting there is this prophet came to give Jeroboam a message, and it was confirmed by the actions that happened, by the altar being broken up and by Jeroboam's hand withering. So at this point, we can believe, for the sake of the story, let's believe that this prophet really is a prophet. He heard the word of the Lord, and so this all fits, okay? So he departed by another road. He followed what God told him to do and did not go back the way he had come to Bethel. By the way, Bethel, that name in Hebrew means house of God. So there was an old prophet living in Bethel. Now this is another, it says he's a prophet, whose son came and told him all that the man of God had done that day in Bethel. When his sons repeated to their father the words the man of God had spoken to the king, which we know were fulfilled, the father asked them, which way did he go? So his sons pointed him out the road taken by the man of God who had come from Judah. That's the southern kingdom. Then he said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me. When they had saddled it, he mounted and followed the man of God, whom he found seated under a terebinth. Now that's Pistacia terebinthus, the turpentine tree. So if you know what turpentine is, it's used in painting and stuff, for cleaning brushes partly and stuff. It has a very strong smell, so I imagine the trees probably smells just a little bit like it. But if you wonder where turpentine comes from, that's where it comes from. When he asked him, are you the man of God who came from Judah? He answered, yes. Then he said, come home with me and have some bread. This is just regular hospitality. This is not strange. I cannot return with you or go with you, and I cannot eat bread or drink water with you in this place, he answered. For I was told by the word of the Lord, you shall not eat bread or drink water there, and do not go back the way you came. Okay, so he's saying what he should. But this other prophet says to him, I too am a prophet like you. And an angel told me by the word of the Lord, bring him back with you to your house to eat bread and drink water. But he was lying to him. It actually says that on here. Why? Why did he do that? You should ask yourself that. Why would he pull a stunt like this? So he went back with him. He believed him. The original prophet believed him. He went back with him, ate bread and drank water at his house. But while they were sitting at table, the word of the Lord came to the prophet who had brought him back. Now, this is the first time in the story where that prophet actually gets something from God. And he cried out to the man of God who had come from Judah. Thus says the Lord, because you rebelled against the charge of the Lord and did not keep the command which the Lord your God gave you, but returned and ate bread and drank water in the place where he told you, do not eat bread or drink water, your corpse shall not be brought to the grave of your ancestors. That's a really horrible curse for somebody in that time. So after he'd eaten bread and drunk, they saddled for him the donkey that belonged to the prophet who had brought him back, and he set out. But a lion met him on the road and killed him. His body lay sprawled on the road, and the donkey remained standing by it, and so did the lion. By the way, I saw a comment a while back from someone who said, well, this story is silly because there's no lions in the Mideast. And you'll get this kind of thing a lot where somebody, well, the Bible's stupid because, everybody knows there's no lions in the Mideast. Actually, there were lions in the Mideast until they went extinct in the 1800s. There's a nice National Geographic article on the lions that used to be there. And that's easy enough to find. But don't take my word for it. Go look up that article or go on and search, were there ever lions in the Mideast? And then you can get an answer on it. But just because somebody tells you that something is stupid and there was never a lion there, just because they aren't there today, doesn't mean they weren't 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Some passersby saw the body lying in the road with a lion standing beside it and carried the news to the city where the old prophet lived. Now, I'd imagine that some of you right now are thinking, well, that was a rotten trick. The guy lied to the prophet, and God seems okay with that because there's no mention of this old prophet that did this, that lied to him, getting in trouble. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. You can think about that one. Pretty interesting. On hearing it, the prophet who had brought him back from his journey said, "It is the man of God who rebelled against the charge of the Lord." You notice there's no sympathy here. I mean, it's like he went against God. I lied to him, but it's his fault. It's not my fault. He knew what he was supposed to do. God told him. God didn't tell him to come with me. He believed me, and it was dumb of him to believe me. I've met people like this. This is more common than you might think. The Lord has delivered him to a lion, which mangled and killed him, according to the word which the Lord had spoken to him. Then he said to his sons, "Saddle the donkey for me," and they saddled it. He went off and found the body sprawled on the road with the donkey and the lion standing beside it. The lion had not eaten the body, nor had it harmed the donkey. The prophet lifted up the body of the man of God and put it on the donkey and brought him back to the city to mourn and bury him. He laid the man's body in his own grave, and they mourned over it. "Alas, my brother." This is the guy that got him killed. After he had buried him, he said to his sons, "When I die, bury me in the grave where the man of God is buried. Lay my bones beside his." I wouldn't blame you if you hated that story. It's pretty weird. The guy lies to him. So here's the reason I'm telling you this story. And there's two others that are a little bit like it. And I'm thinking, do I want to tell you about those now, or do I want to wait? And I think maybe I'm going to wait just a little bit here. Think about the relationship between us and God. More than that, think about your relationship with God. Let's just say that you were blessed enough that you had a vision, like this prophet, and that God talked to you and told you something, and it turned out to be true, and you were sure that it was really God because it was so clear, and you acted on it, you did everything you were supposed to do, and then somebody comes along and says, "Well, you're wrong, because God told me something else." But you don't know anything about that person. You don't know what kind of life they live. You don't know their relationship with God. None of us knows the relationship that somebody else has with God. We only know what we think the relationship is we have with God. And if the Holy Spirit has acted in our life in a powerful enough way, if we've allowed God to act on us, if we've allowed that relationship to develop, then we will be pretty sure. You don't have to be a perfect person to be close to God. As a matter of fact, how many perfect people are there in the world right now? Probably zero. So, and goodness knows there's enough saints that certainly we're not perfect people, and yet we consider them saints. But if you have that relationship with God and He has moved in your life with power, then why would you necessarily take the word of somebody else when you don't even really know what's going on there and have them tell you you're wrong and no, you should start doing this other thing over here? I mean, the prophet, the original prophet, the first one in the story, the man of God, they said, he did his job. And when he saw that his prophecy that he gave to the king was fulfilled, he should look at that and go, okay, yeah, God told me to do this. I believe that God told me to do it because it happened. So he goes off, does the right thing, returns, getting ready to return to his home and follow what the Lord said. And then this other guy comes along that he doesn't even know and says, "Oh, I'm a prophet. God talks to me and God told me to tell you this." And the other guy didn't think to pray. The original guy didn't think, "Oh, wait, let me go back and listen to God." He didn't go away from the guy and say, "Wait a minute, let me go pray because this doesn't make any sense." If he had, it seems likely that God would have told him, that he would have, thought about it and said, "No, and here's the other thing, is if he was supposed to eat bread and drink water, just means eat and drink, in that place with this old prophet that came out and lied to him, if he was supposed to do that, why wouldn't God have just told him? Unless this old prophet comes. If this old prophet comes and talks to you, yeah, sure, then eat with him. But that didn't happen. So he had a firsthand experience of God in a powerful way, And then when somebody else told him something counter to that, he didn't go back and get that firsthand experience and say and ask, what do you want me to do? What's going on there? Why would somebody take something on somebody else's word when they could get it from God's mouth? Directly from God. And we already know that's what he got in the first place. So if I'm kind of excited about this in a way, the reason is because once you start to have a good relationship with God, where he's really guiding your life and you're enjoying that and you're getting the benefits, you're getting peace, things are going well because of it. Even if there's difficulties in your life, you're being helped through them by the presence of God. People will come along and tell you to do it a different way. They'll tell you it doesn't work. They'll give you all kinds of advice, and they can't even manage their own life. This old prophet goes and lies to somebody, which under the Old Testament, that's one of the worst things somebody could do. That's in the Bible, that if you're a prophet and you go to somebody and say, the Lord said this, and you're lying, you're condemned. Normally that would be the death penalty, but it didn't work exactly that way. It wasn't, it was not a time where that was being enforced apparently or something. And nobody ever knew, and we don't know what happened to the guy. But the point is that somebody else will come along and tell you, oh, all this religion stuff, all this other stuff going on, well, that's all stupid, and I know the way that you should live. But if you've got a way of life that's working for you, you have to be pretty careful about changing it, unless you're changing it for something better. So if you think that you've got a close relationship with God, but then you meet somebody and over time you realize this person has knowledge and a knowledge of God and a love of God that's greater than my own, and it seems like God is with them in a powerful way, you might take their advice, if their life reflects that. But if there's somebody and their life is a mess, and every place they go, they're making a mess out of things, and you look at them and go, oh, I guess they know how to live, I'm going to take their advice, well, that's just dumb. So anyway, that's what happened there. What's interesting is that afterward, the guy says, oh yeah, I'm going to bury him in my grave, and then when I die, then I want to be buried with him. And it almost makes you wonder if this guy almost had like a celebrity thing going on, that he was thinking, oh, this guy's a real man of God because God's really with him and he really did say this was going to happen, and it did. I want a little part of that fame. I want to touch that. I want to hang out with this guy a little bit because he's really cool, because God's really doing something in him, and he's not doing anything in my life. So I'm going to go get close to him. But in doing that, it destroyed the other person. So in a similar way, if your life is really good and you're close to God, you may find that other people want to be around you. They like being around you, but you may find they're destructive to your life. So you have to evaluate that and say, is this a good person for me to be hanging around with? People will say, well, you shouldn't judge and everything. And it's true. We can't judge who's going to heaven, who's going to hell. But you do have to figure out what are healthy relationships for you. Now, another reason that I bring this up is I haven't always done a great job in the class that I'm making this video for of reminding you about safe environment, which is a big thing that we have. It's very necessary, that you need to be careful, especially when you're young, that you don't get fooled or used by people. Sometimes it can be by people that are only a few years older than you. Sometimes it can be people much older. Sometimes it's people that are authorities. Obviously, there's been issues with priests, but there have been issues with nuns, with nurses, with doctors, with coaches, with teachers, all sorts of things. Honestly, I know somebody that was the same age as another person and used her horribly and really made a mess out of her life. And they were the same age, but she had a power over her that other people didn't have. When you're hungry, when you're lonely, when you're hungry for affection, when you're hungry for love, when you're hungry for attention, when you're hungry just for another human being and somebody is in need of someone to use, you're vulnerable. And there are times that those associations are really unhealthy. So again, like this story, it's something to think about. Now, just briefly, I wanted to give you just two or three other things. The story of Adam and Eve. Most people know something about that story, but it's kind of similar. Adam and Eve walked in the garden with God. They had a personal relationship with God. Very different from anything we can imagine. And this isn't, it's a story. We're not saying literally there's an Adam and Eve. I'm not saying there's not. But according to the story, they were directly friends with God. And then, the serpent comes along and goes, hey, I got some ideas for you. And, this is the way it is. They didn't go back and have a conversation with God. They didn't trust God. They trusted themselves. Their pride took over. They said, yeah, if I take this, then I'll be like God. No one, yeah, the serpent's right. They didn't know the serpent. Just some guy comes along. They don't know if he's good or bad or anything else. And of course, they didn't know much about evil at that time or anything. But the point is that they had a relationship with God that was close, that was intimate. And when somebody came along with whom they did not have a relationship and didn't know anything about, that's who they believed. See the problem? So there's another one that I think is interesting as well, and that's in the book of Numbers. And in there, Moses was, led the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, the Hebrews at the time, I guess you'd say. But anyway, he let them out, and he had an incredible relationship with God. He would go and talk, it says that he would go and talk with God face to face. What that means, I don't even know. I know that when he talked to God, that the people could see that his face was glowing. Now, I personally don't take that his face was glowing like, and everything. But that's the word that's used is a word that means, glowing or radiant and I like radiant because I like to think that when God and Moses, who were friends, talked to each other, that when Moses came out of the tent where he was talking with God or came down from the mountain, that people saw by his expression that he had seen God and that his face just shined with joy and with love and just that it left a mark on his face. There's people that if you hang around with them a little while, you just get a smile on your face and afterward you just feel so good for a while. And people say, oh, you look happy. And it's like, yeah, I was just hanging around with so-and-so. And I just really like being around them, and it shows on your face. So I always kind of took it that way, but, other people have taken it differently. Some translators back in the day, hundreds of years ago, saw the word and didn't understand what the word was in Hebrew or in Greek. And they translated it they mistranslated it as horns. So that's the reason why you'll see some statues of Moses and he has horns. Because they confused the word at the time. I can't tell you what the original words were, but they confused the words for being radiant, for having this look or glowing face, with the word for horns. So sculptors actually made statues with Moses with horns. Doesn't make any sense. They really should have figured out, this doesn't make any sense that he would grow horns after he talks with God. And then after a while, the horns would go away. And then they'd come back every time he talked to God. I mean, just like picturing it, it makes no sense. But the point is that he had this relationship with God. Let's get back to that. And so then his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam, they're of the same bloodline. Now, for most times in history, especially ancient history, a lot of rulers would pass things down to their children. And even today, if there's a really big deal politician, their child will be blessed. I mean, their child will have an automatic chance at running for president, or they'll have an automatic chance at inheriting their Senate seat, something. But the idea is that if you're the child of a millionaire or billionaire, you're pretty much set and you're just going to continue on. So it really hasn't changed that much in some ways. But anyway, they thought, well, we're of the same blood, and we're kind of jealous because Moses is getting all this attention. He's in charge. We don't always like the decisions he makes. And I think that we should really be in charge too, And so they go to Moses in the book of Numbers. They go to Moses and they say, hey, does God only speak through you? Because I think he speaks through me too. And there's no record that they have that kind of relationship with God. And there's nothing, I mean, there's nothing going up to that point that really shows that kind of the same kind of relationship as Moses. And Moses was very humble. For somebody that was a great leader and was the guy at that time, he was humble. And it says that in the scripture. It's actually kind of funny. And it says, by far, Moses was the most meek man on the face of the earth. He really didn't want trouble. He wasn't going to fight with them. And so God talks to Moses and says, you know what? I need to resolve this. So tell him to come out and talk to me. So the three of them come out. And anyway, the three of them come out, and God says to Miriam and Aaron, do you understand the relationship I have with Moses? He's my friend. He and I talk face to face. Everybody else, I speak to you in riddles. I do signs on the mountain. I do lightning. I do all this other stuff with everybody else. But with Moses, it's just us. He is somebody that I trust. I know Moses will do the right thing. He is a trusted friend, my intimate friend in some translations. So, guys, God says to him, guys, why did you think it would be okay to do this? Why did you think it was okay to say, oh yeah, we can do this too? Moses isn't special. He's my friend. He's my close friend. And you did this to him. What do you think? How do you think I feel about that? So, Miriam gets cursed and all that, but then they ask God for mercy, and he gives her mercy and all that. And it's beautiful that they do that and that God does that. But can you see how that's similar? That somebody comes along. In their case, it wasn't that they shouldn't have listened to somebody else. They should have hesitated because they put themselves as the equal of Moses when Moses clearly had a different kind of relationship. By the way, there's more to it than that. That's interesting, but it doesn't change the lesson. I don't want to distract from it too much. So that's interesting. Also, the Book of Wisdom has a part in there where it says, let us beset the just one because he's obnoxious to us. He's annoying to us. And it's a thing that sometimes people will say, I've heard this story from a lot of people, that when they're trying to do the right thing, that other people just say, oh, you're just annoying. Why don't you ease up? You don't need to be like this. What's funny is that if you don't use profanity, if you don't swear, you don't use dirty language, but you don't criticize anybody else, you just don't use it, you will find that people will notice. And that sometimes if they swear, if they use profanity, they'll say, oh, excuse me, I know you don't do that, or I know you don't like that. And of course, if somebody does that with me, I say, well, I don't use it, but, I'm not going to hurt my ears. And I don't worry about it. But in some cases, they'll really get offended because you're not using profanity. Or because you're not doing other stuff. People feel guilty so easily. And they're just so sensitive that if you have to really go around going, everything you're doing is fine, or else people aren't happy. So it's interesting to see that this is in the Bible, and that sometimes even a person that's close to God will give more weight to someone that doesn't have that relationship than they should. It's second guessing. Some people call some of this stuff is almost gaslighting, which you can look up. Which is named after a movie, by the way. But the idea is that people are going to come along and try to make you doubt your relationship with God, make you doubt what the truth is, all that kind of stuff. And if you've got a good relationship with God, rely on that. And, as long as it's not telling, if you think God's telling you to go out there and murder the neighbors or something, you don't have a good relationship with God. There's something wrong there. See a doctor. I don't know. But, we're talking about if you're really living a good life, you may sin, but that you're going back to God and you're trying to work it through with God and you have that relationship. Trust the Holy Spirit working your life, and don't necessarily trust somebody else to know God better than you. Because ultimately, God seeks the relationship with you. He's not looking to do it through someone else. So, and there's a whole nother thing we could do on that, but something to think about. Read the story again. Let it bother you. because the story bugs me. It annoys me. I'm mad at that other old prophet that lied to him. It's like, oh, I want something to happen to him. That's not very nice, but we're looking for justice. We're not going to find it, and that's not the point of the story. I think what I told you is a good way to look at it. Maybe it'll be helpful for you. So don't be afraid to have confidence in yourself and your relationship with God, but make sure that relationship with God is real and that it's good, and that you're not just fooling yourself. Anyway, thank you for watching, and please leave a comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. But I always love comments and questions. And thank you very much.